and welcome to BSB Must Reads, where we share with you all the books we think you must be reading this month. Today, I have with me brand new author, JJ Hale. Hi, JJ.
Hi.
So I see that you have an accent there. Where are you at?
I'm in Ireland, in Cork.
Awesome, awesome. All right, we are going to conscript you to do a bunch of our audiobooks with that accent. Perfect. So you're here today to talk about your first novel, Truly Wanted. We're very, very excited. So I'd love for you to tell everyone a little bit about you, who you are, and then about Truly Wanted, and to share a reading with us.
So yeah, my name is Jess. I go by JJ for writing. From Cork in Ireland. As you can tell by the accent, I still maintain I don't have an accent, but for all you guys, I do. I work a little bit about me. I work in technology as a day job. And obviously right now I'm writing contemporary romance for Both Strokes Books as well, which is great. This is my debut novel, Truly Wanted, both here. It's a friends to lovers romance, which is something I'm pretty drawn to writing. I write a lot of that. I've probably been writing a lot of different versions of this book for a while, until I was able to kind of get this one out and now out into the world. So the book itself, the two main characters, Sam and Brooke, have been best friends since college. Sam grew up in foster care and she has ADHD, like me. So with that comes a lot of trauma, with foster care and a lot of abandonment issues and stuff like that. And then on the other side, you've got Brooke, and she's a widow. She's a single mom, so she has a 3-year-old, and they're both basically a mess. And they're trying to navigate, life in general and all of the stuff that they're dealing with, along with a newfound kind of tension between them, that they've realized is turning their friendship into something more, without trying to ruin the bond that they have. So that's the book. I'm going to start with a reading from kind of near the start. It's actually just a couple of pages into the book. So it gives kind of a basis of their friendship and stuff like that. So what's happened leading up to this is Brooke has just come back from a horrible date. Sam was babysitting, and they're just sitting together afterwards, kind of chatting about it. They just threw on a romance movie, and so I'm going to start it there. I'm never going to have that again. Sam barely heard the whispered comment. She turned her head, frowning at the look of sadness clouding Brooke's face. Don't be silly, Bea. One failed clumsy date doesn't mean it won't happen. Brooke shook her head. No, I had my one true love with Jacob. That picture perfect, oh wow, I love you moment. The wedding that would have been perfect if my dad was still alive to walk me down the aisle. But even that was like a movie scene, with Jacob's dad stepping in. His family welcomed me from the moment I first met them. And look at them now. It's been 3 years since he died, and I'm still closer to them than my own. Even if I did meet someone else, where do they fit into that? Sam reached out, instinctively holding Brooke's hand as Brooke continued talking. I got my happily not so ever after. Then 7 years, 1 kid, and 1 car accident later, he up and died. So now I'll spend the next 40 years or whatever alone. At least I got my chance. Some people never do, I guess. Sam noticed the tears that welled in Brooke's eyes. She pulled Brooke in and hugged her tight. That's possibly one of the most ridiculous things you've ever said, which is impressive, since you say ridiculous things often. Brooke's mouth opened wide as she pulled back and slapped Sam's arm lightly. Way to kick a girl when she's down, Sammy. Sam shook her head with a sigh. Well, seriously, you think you're going to be alone? What am I? Decoration? You think you're getting rid of me that easily? I have abandonment issues. We both know I'm not letting you out of my sight. Metaphorically, not stalkerishly. Brooke rolled her eyes. That's different. You're my best friend. It's not the same. I'm your person. I'm always going to be here. You'll wish you were alone when you get sick of me. Brooke's smile was sad when she said, You'll find someone, look at you. Soon enough, you'll find your happily ever after, and then what? Sam pressed. Frustration bubbled at the notion of Brooke thinking anything or anyone would make her less important to Sam. And then I leave you behind. Maybe that's now a contender for the most ridiculous thing you've said. Don't get mad at me. You know exactly what I mean. We're not together. We're not in love. We're not going to fall into bed together at the end of the night and wake up wrapped up in each other in the morning. Her frustration was reflected back on Brooke's face. It didn't stop her stubborn reply, though. Actually, we've done that many times. Brooke threw her hands in the air. Not with sex. We're not going to get married and live the rest of our lives together like them. Sam turned to where Brooke pointed at the screen as the happy couple gazed gooey-eyed at each other after a long kiss. Her heart started to beat a little faster as the scene played out, similar to one that had run through her head many times before, starring her and the other woman sitting beside her. She pulled her eyes from the television and back to Brooke, her mind still fixated on the fairy tale ending she'd just witnessed on screen. Her mouth went dry and she blurted out the next sentence before she even had time to fully form it in her brain. Maybe we should make a deal. If we're both still single in, say, 10 years, we get married and live happily ever after. Her shrug was intended to lighten her words, and she threw in a trademark grin as if it were the most logical idea in the world. Sometimes her impulsivity was a gift. It allowed her to experience things or take chances before the anxious side of her brain could talk her out of them. But more often than not, it just left her as surprised by what came out of her mouth as anyone else. Brooke's glare didn't help Sam's heart rate return to its regular rhythm. You're being ridiculous. This isn't the plot of a romance novel sitting on that shelf. She gestured vaguely at the bookshelf in the corner of the room. Granted, it's totally one I would read. But stop joking around. I'm having an actual crisis here. I'm being serious. So am I, Sam countered. We prefer being in each other's company more than anyone else in the world. I won't let you go into an old spinster. I totally marry the shit out of you. Brooke's look of frustration melted and a grin tugged at her lips. You're ridiculous. Brooke repeated, but her smile was growing as she shook her head. The smile faltered as Brooke gulped, seemingly lost in her thoughts. What's going on in that head of yours? Sam asked. Brooke's gaze darted around the room as she bit her lip before she suddenly blurted. We don't even know if we're, compatible? Sam frowned. Of course we are. We spend time together constantly. We love the same movies and books, and we talk about... Sam noticed Brooke's raised eyebrow and realized that's not what she meant. He crept up in Sam's face as it dawned on her. Oh, compatible, as in like... Brooke nodded, taking over the conversation. Sex. It's pretty important to me. To any marriage I intend to be in. I get it's not a big deal for everyone, but I like sex, despite the current lack of it. Which you think would be less of an issue, given my attraction ranges to all genders. Sam nodded, but her throat was suddenly extremely dry, unlike other, more southern parts of her body. This line of conversation was doing things to her. To be fair, it had been far too long since she'd last been with anyone, so it didn't take much these days. Before the past few years, Sam had plenty of experience falling into bed with women, but it had been a long time since any of those women knew anything about her past the surface level, and not one of them had known her like Brooke. Sam imagined her lips pressed against the soft curve of Brooke's neck. Her eyes travelled along Brooke's jawline as she considered how it would feel to press her lips against each inch of skin that currently captured her attention. She watched Brooke's teeth graze against her bottom lip, and Sam lifted her gaze to Brooke's, which was focused on her. Eyes that were usually an open book to Sam were currently hard to read. Heat flooded Sam's cheeks even more as she doubted her own lusty thoughts were as well hidden on her face. Her heart beat faster as Brooke cocked her head to the side, the unforgiving silence enveloping them. What the hell was happening?
Oh, something tells me they're not going to be friends for long.
Not just friends, anyway.
Not just friends, right? That's awesome. I love it. What a great reading. I especially I'd marry the shit out of you.
I wish that one too.
So, okay, as mentioned, this is your first book, hopefully one of many. But I'm always curious what prompted you to sit down and write. And when you did, why this story of all the many options available?
Yeah. I feel like I've always been a storyteller. Like before writing, when I was younger, it was a lot of acting stuff out, a lot of imaginative play. I started reading really early, like before I started school. Reading was a big thing in my house. There was books everywhere. So I think that was a big part of it. I just always wanted to tell stories in whatever way they came. And writing then started probably when I was about 10 or 11. It was a lot of poetry and a lot of really embarrassing old stories when I was younger. But I could never manage to kind of get myself to just sit down and write something to the finish. I'd write a bit and then get distracted or something else would come up, or I could never focus and I never really knew why. And it was always a frustration, or I'd feel, like I was never going to be able to do it. And I think the biggest turning point for me was understanding about my ADHD, because I wasn't diagnosed till I was 29. So I'd always known there was something different, but I'd never had a name for it or a reason or why. So when I started figuring that out and looking into it, I was like, oh, my brain just works differently. And there's different things that work for me that don't work by, the usual advice you'd see online or the usual ways people get things done. And so a lot of kind of coming to terms with that, accepting that, understanding that, and that led to me being able to, first of all, find ways to sit down and actually write and finish something. And then this story actually started as, so it was in the middle of a different story, and I just wasn't feeling it. I wasn't going anywhere. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to write something really short and fun, just to clear my mind out and get it out. So I just started writing this. And after the first page, I was like, oh no, this is not going to be short. So it just took over. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a storyline in mind. I had nothing when I started. I just started writing it. And as I started writing, it just kind of evolved. And like there's been so many versions of it now, I guess, because it was very raw at the start and nothing there, and it's evolved. But even from the start, the core characters were the same. Like they were the thing that drew me in. Their stories, how they felt about things, how they experienced things. And obviously with Sam having ADHD as well, I actually wrote the book originally, the very first draft of it, without saying or even knowing Sam had ADHD. I said nothing about it in the book. I didn't discuss it. And later on, I was kind of like, I wonder, I would really like to write a book with that in it. And it was actually a friend of mine was like, oh, I thought Sam had ADHD in the book and you just hadn't said it. And I was like, I read back on it myself and I realized I had written it that way. I just hadn't realized or said it. So to me, I think representation wise, it's very important to have it on page, to call things out and to say it so that people can take that away. So I went back over and put those into the book and kind of developed that a bit more. So yeah, I've probably been writing versions of the story, as I said, for a long time, and it all kind of came together to be this, and it was more the characters than anything that pulled me in.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that you unintentionally wrote a neurodivergent character, which I think is one of the kind of most interesting and relevant parts of your book, and kind of sets it apart a little bit, especially because of your own experience. So that's really cool. So this is, as we have discovered, a friends to lovers romance. And I'm always curious about this trope because it seems kind of hard to pull off, because if they're friends, why haven't they gotten together yet? Right? That's always kind of the question that people ask. You kind of think, oh, the one, that you're going to be with forever, there's that spark from the beginning. So tell us about Brooke and Brooke's journey, because Sam's had a crush on her since forever. But Brooke hasn't quite realized that what she feels is more than friendship.
Yeah. And this was something I think that I wanted to really play carefully and take into account in the book, because Brooke has had what she thought was a one true love before. She was married. She loved her husband. There was absolutely no doubt in that. And I wanted to be clear that Sam and her relationship with Sam wasn't a replacement. It wasn't, this was good, but oh no, I got this thing and it's so much better. Because a lot of people think that about not only, I suppose, books and people with previous partners, but also with sexuality in general. They think you have to prefer one or the other. And it's not about that for Brooke. And yeah, I think like previously it just never even entered her head, because when she met Sam, she was with her boyfriend and then husband, and she was happy, she was in love, and she did have a spark with Sam, but it wasn't a romantic spark. It was just, this is a person who was really important to her in her life. And Sam became a really important person in her life for that whole journey. And with Sam, I guess as well, she had this crush, but it wasn't that she was lingering, waiting for something to happen or to get with Brooke. She had a crush at the start. Then she met, Brooke's boyfriend at the time, and that kind of just it went to the side. It was like she was her best friend, and that was the main important part of it. So for Brooke, I think it was almost a shock when these feelings started developing, and it was more that she had never let herself. This had never been an option for her until suddenly it was. And that part that I just read is, I guess, where kind of a thought first flickered. When Sam was joking about them getting married and stuff like that. It's the first time it ever kind of allowed herself to enter that in her head. But of course, there's so much there. They've built up this whole relationship, and for Brooke, it's not just about how she feels, or it's not just about like, what does this mean for my past relationship? It's also, she knows Sam's past, and she doesn't want to risk losing Sam or hurting Sam for something that she doesn't really know what it means. So I think for Brooke, it was probably, in a way, it was easier because the feelings became new and they kind of developed as a new relationship, kind of one would. For Sam, it was a bit harder because they'd always been there, kind of lingering in the surface. But yeah, it was important to me to kind of show that people can love multiple people deeply, and it doesn't diminish or take away from the previous relationship, and it's not a comparison. It's just what it is. There is lots of ways to love people, and lots of different ways to be in love and fall in love. And I think that was important for me to show, that like Brooke fell in love with Sam as a friend first, and then as something more when that became a thing that came into her mind.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's totally true, and part of their connection is what they've built up through their friendship. So awesome. So if readers could come away feeling a certain emotion, what would that be? Well, what would you, as the author who's written this story, want that feeling to be? Is there any kind of like message or moral in your story that you think, oh, I just hope that readers get this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of them. And I think that, I hope that the reader finds the one that they need when they're reading this book. The main ones for me, I guess, throughout was that, blood doesn't make family. And that's an important thing for me. And for, what I wanted to show in the book is that there are lots of different ways to make a family. And whether that's romantic, whether it's friendship, whether it's just a bond or a community that's been built, there are your people out there. Your people are there somewhere. And if that didn't come from where you were, then that's okay. Like, your worth is not defined by where you came from. And that's a really important part to me, I think. Like, as a reader, I remember like my favorite parts of books have always been where I'm like, oh wow, someone feels that too, or well, that's not just me. And it's like that feeling of being seen and understood, and someone gets you. And I think that, like, growing up queer and with ADHD, even if I didn't know it, that representation wasn't easy to find. It wasn't easy to read a book and feel like this person understood me. And so I think if I want a reader to take away anything, it's that, like, just feeling like someone got me, or understood a part of me that I didn't know someone else got. So that would be kind of the big thing for me.
Yeah, that's lovely. I love that. And I'm sure that readers will walk away with that message. I think it's so important for the LGBTQ community, particularly, to see that in novels and see themselves. So thank you so much, Jess. Please do check out Truly Wanted by J.J. Hale. Her debut novel out in October 1st from the Bold Strokes Books web store, and October 11th everywhere books are sold.